Welcome. I'm trying to make sure I get the mic level at a good place. I think it is. Welcome to our panel discussion on leadership in quality assurance, future of enterprise software. As the name implies, we're looking at those facets that contribute to software quality of enterprise software, by which I define as software used in organizations of some size. It's up to your imagination as to how big that size is to constitute enterprise software. Our panelists can also help elucidate what they thought of as enterprise software and the facets of quality assurance. I have a distinguished panels. All of them are speakers at this conference. To my left, I have Jeff Singh, I have Ron Wilson, I have John Connolly, and John Bach. And without doing injustice to their own background, I'm going to first give them about 1 minute a person to introduce themselves, and then I will start by asking a number of leading questions. The purpose of this panel discussion is to look at those things that are beyond testings, but are nevertheless important aspects of software quality. So without further ado, I'll let our speaker introduce themselves.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Singh. I've been doing QA for almost 18 plus years. I started off as an intern for QA back in the days. Right now, I'm a director of engineering at Iterable. Iterable is a MarTech company in the Bay Area. We're a SaaS company that provides channel marketing. My roles there is I run the QE team, I run the application support engineering team, and I run the operations team, and I'm also the chief of staff to the head of engineering.
Hi, I'm Ron Wilson with Powin Energy. So we do big commercial batteries, store energy for that. So I'm the software QA manager for that.
Hi, I'm John Connolly. I own my own company, Articulate Domain. I'm a consultant to basically consultants. They call me in when they need a domain-driven designer to help them figure out how to organize software better, not because they're microservices or a big ball of money.
I am John Bach. Next year is my 30th year in testing quality and program management, which I pivoted to about 10 years ago. Enterprise experience mostly at eBay the last 13 years until January, where I was laid off. Now I'm an independent consultant, not by choice, but by necessity. So I'm networking and gathering ideas. I'm always a student of testing. And I want to get back into the enterprise. I worked at eBay, I worked at Microsoft, I worked at HP, and I love the challenge of trying to figure out how they can remember what it was like to be small and agile with a lowercase a. So that's what I'll be listening for. So thank you.
I promise I'll let our panelists do most of the speaking, but to set the context, I kind of want to mention that I worked in different industries, both private sector, public sector, startups, and mature organizations. Through these organizations, I worked in television broadcasting, I worked in internet B2B and financial trading, and I also worked in government quite a bit in the last couple of decades. Many of these applications are mission critical. I work for the state of Oregon, then IT investment oversight, quality assurance. And I'm currently the e-government program manager responsible for most of the state's websites and clearing the state online payments, a lot of it. Last year, the program cleared like $1.5 billion working with our prime contractors and our payment processor. Now, a lot of talks at this conference focus on testing, automated testing, and rightfully so. Testing is kind of an important aspect of making sure things work. Now, many would say, if those of you that advocate shifting left, there are a lot of things that can be done early on to make sure things go well. And as you know, projects that are technically successful don't necessarily mean they are meet business needs. So my first kind of open-ended question for our panelists has to do with when you develop large software systems for enterprise use, how do you make sure you get the correct requirements to make sure they meet business needs? We can start with
All right. Thanks for the softball. That's a I think, well, first off, enterprise, I think, means a lot of different terms for a lot of different people. Like John mentioned, he wants to work at an enterprise company. For me, I've been primarily in SaaS companies, startups, and when we say enterprise, we mean a customer who is paying a lot of ARR that's gonna make or break a quarter, who has a lot of requirements to be at that space. So generally, they're more legal requirements, security requirements, what they ask, their SLOs, SLAs are going to be a lot more stringent than your emerging markets, your smaller customers. So that's what we consider enterprise. And when looking at what an enterprise customer is, you have to understand, the contract, the legality of what they're looking for. For example, most of them will ask, what's your SOC 2? What's your, what kind of security penetration testing you've done? If you have some APIs, what's your SLAs, SLOs? What are they guaranteed? What number of the support? What is their uptime, et cetera, because they're going to be paying you a lot of money and they have a lot of expectations of what they should be. So when we develop features for those customers, generally we have to come with the requirements themselves have to be different because we have to understand what they're going to get. We can't just deploy code to them and it breaks, right? Like smaller customers, if we're building faster, we can be a little more loose. But with enterprise customers, a lot of times, from the very beginning, they have to be gated. They have to be on their own clusters. They can't be noisy neighbors. They have to have feature flags. You have to make sure that everything you do does not change the legal contractual terms that they're expected on. So TLDR, you have to white glove everything around them, even how you deploy code to your infrastructure around them.
So for us in the battery storage business, we have a lot of things related to safety. So safety is critical for us. We have these large battery packs. We all know what happens to batteries when they get too hot, they explode. And that can have a negative impact on, our company's reputation, on the customers that are using these products. And so it's really important for us to make sure that things are operating. And also it has an environment impact when these batteries explode and they burn. So we have to make sure from a requirements perspective that we clearly understand these things. And we have to verify and do a lot of validation. We also guarantee that these batteries are going to last for 20 years. Now, whether they do or not, we have to verify and test that, right? And if the batteries can't last for 20 years, then we have to replace those things. So there's a lot of, we have a test facility that tests batteries and how long do they last. So there are, legal implications, there are environment implications, but there's a lot of safety. We don't want technicians to die when they get shocked by a battery. So it's pretty significant. And, we do take testing really pretty seriously and, try to prevent these things as much as we can.
In my experience, getting to the right requirements is so subjective. And it really does take a way of scoping what those requirements will be. And requirements have generally been, usually have been pretty accurate for a portion of what the customer needs, but not very thorough. And that can be frustrating in test, I'm sure. So the way I like to go at getting quality software requirements that generates a quality outcome is to ask a lot of questions of the domain expert, the person who actually knows how the business is being run. And when they make statements, I stress test those statements. When they say, we only need this, then I think about the things that are around that and say, so you don't need this, and you don't need this, and you don't need that. And I really pick apart the all or nothing statements and really try to model out the business in the domain. I didn't get into it much in my talk earlier, but when we're modeling out the domain and the domain experts are at it, I bring them in and they're the primary audience. They're the ones that are laying out how their process works. And we try to run concrete examples through that process. So if you're, say, selling train tickets, you're in transportation, you're selling train tickets, and we have a train ticket processing system. This is how you buy it. This is how you get a reservation on a seat. This is all that stuff. And we try to take Susan through buying a train ticket, all the different ways that Susan can buy a train ticket. And we example map all of these user scenarios of how it can happen. And we find out what can and can't go wrong. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And we really stress test these requirements in a designed process model. It takes more work to do that up front, but it saves 10 times the amount of stress on the back end.
How do you get the right requirements? Perspective. US testers, me as a tester, we know this. What persona, who am I going to behave like when I meet the software today? What questions will I ask of the software to get it to give me its result? So as a program manager, which I identify with at least the last 10 years, I'm back to being a quality manager as a consultant now. And I find that they're really the same mindset. Tester is about finding bugs in the product. A program manager is about finding risks on the project or multiple projects, which means relationships, just like you have as testers, or if you're a program manager in the audience, like Jeff, actually in his talk, he gave me a really interesting lens, a perspective, I'll use the word lens, to see the value of quality assurance through. And that is just like SaaS, software as a service, and what it's done over the years. He's got some compelling graphs. The lens through which he saw our value as QA in his talk through the model of SaaS was compelling. So imagine you're going to put on a testing conference. Okay, I think Moss, you can relate to this. What are the right requirements? You need a big conference room. You need food. You need a good location. You need an evening event, right? So I bet Moss looks at it through different lenses. The participant, the speaker, the event staff, people who are traveling, people who are local. I love looking at things through a lens, either as a program manager or as a tester. And so that's why I was compelled to do this talk yesterday about not only shifting left to get that lens and shifting right to get that lens, the more customer focused lens, but shifting out, like I try to do as a program manager, to see relationships between legal, business, operations, and also shifting in to go into detail, like so telescope versus microscope. And there, and all of that I've just said are opportunities for requirements, not only explicit requirements, but implicit requirements, which I don't think we talk enough about.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to very quickly highlight some of the comments as part of my attempt for a second round of comments. Jeff here mentioned very succinctly the importance of organization-specific requirements that you really need to get to know, given a standard set of offerings. And we know all commercial products, whether it's SaaS or not, can be mapped onto all kinds of workflows and organization specifics. Getting that organization specific right is very important. And Ron talked about the importance of regulatory requirements, and that companies have an organization of social responsibility to adhere to those regulations and to protect the environment. John talked about the importance of domain expertise, and we chatted earlier about how there's ongoing interest, of course, of organization making sure that detail requirements sync up with business needs. And then last but not least, John's Bach's view of that lens through the different stakeholders. So I think is a given that sometimes it's very difficult to get the requirement correct immediately. So I'd like to elicit the possible contribution of like program management and possibly the roles of iterating through cycles to make sure that the requirements in fact converge to what an organization implementing or acquiring the software might need to do. Yeah. Who wants to take this one first?
Oh, can you reframe the question?
From the point of view of management, program management specifically, how might you use the role of management methods and techniques to assure that you get the requirements right from fairly high level to increasingly detailed level with or without iterations?
Yeah, so for us, and probably most of us here, like there's an extreme sense of urgency to like get, our product out the door. And, we've kind of gone and moved from more of a startup mode and startup mentality to a more established process, documented process that we kind of follow. So we have product owners that, provide guidance and direction in terms of what they want to see and when they want to see it. And then we, have previously had issues where a feature, for example, takes multiple releases to kind of finish and get out the door. We've changed that approach a little bit to more of incremental. So a given feature may have 2 or 3 iterations of things or phases. And so we are trying to more systematically project and get working features out the door to our customers faster. And, if we go through a phase 1, phase 2, we figure maybe that's good enough. Maybe we don't even do phase 3. We move on to something it's more of a priority. So we are trying to increment the work. I will say we had a feature recently with 58 points. I wasn't real happy about that. Like that's way too big. So, we're trying to break these things down into manageable things and get them out the door. We're also trying to make sure that the product owners are reviewing these things. We go through a review process before it goes out the door, just to confirm that's what they want to see and that everything's working before it's deployed.
So it's pretty commonly said that all models are wrong, but some are useful. You guys have probably heard that before. Iteration is just taking a wrong model and making it less wrong over time. That's all it's doing. If you're trying to get to a perfect model, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. But that iterative approach in a domain setting, in a domain modeling setting, is we bring the domain experts. A lot of times people say, well, what's the deliverable out of modeling? The model is the deliverable, and we can put that on a diagram, and that model is going to instruct the developers on what they need to do inside those contexts, and we can, teach them how to take that model and make it actionable. But the model inside the minds of the domain experts change over time. Have you noticed that? It doesn't stay static. They're not librarians. They don't go and find this was the model I told you 3 years ago that I wanted. That just doesn't happen. So the event storming and all the things that we do to get to that model, it's kind of like, it's a worksheet, but it's not valuable long-term, because what is needed 3 years later is going to be different. And the model is evolving. It is change. Change is the true const. It is what we have to deal with. So we're never going to get it right. But we are going to get it more right today through iteration. And I think that was the whole point of Agile. It wasn't to get rid of design. It was to say, let's do design iteratively rather than do it all up front. And so iteration isn't just about developing iteratively. It's about talking with the domain experts iteratively and improving the model over time.
That's wonderful, John. when you said the word model, I knew exactly how I was going to answer this question, and I didn't know how I was going to answer it until I heard, Ron kick off that bit of what happens when requirements go wrong. As a program manager, I have a model of how requirements are showing up on roadmaps, right? And I have to make sense of that. Sense making is really important as a program manager. And so I may not look at the exact requirements because it's too much of the microscope. I'm more of a telescope as a program manager. Alignment of bigger pictures. Has anyone talked to legal? Has anyone talked to security? Has anyone talked to operations? My last role at eBay was my favorite. I was a program manager for the Seek platform, which was the customer survey platform that any engineering team could leverage to put up a survey, a clickable link on their site page, like eBay search or my eBay, where you can favorite items, right? That's the watch list as a feature. Tell us what you think. You click that and it's a Likert scale or whatever you want to make as an engineering team to get basically requirements post fact after release, right? Because it's in production of what the expectations were of your customers. So we get that data and I would look at that data and say, oh, this is interesting. This is a pattern. This is a trend, or this is a bug. This needs to go to this is really a watch list bug. This is a search bug. But the fun for me was looking at the opportunities of sentiment that came in and saying, what explicit or implicit requirements does this sentiment connote? What is this customer trying to tell us about their missed expectations? And is it on a roadmap? Because it could be, I can't tell them, we know about this, we're gonna fix this, because it's secret. But if it is a bug and I already know about it, then I can say, hey team, hey watch list team, here's another bit of sentiment for you. In other words, another requirement that somebody had that maybe we missed, because after all, it is a bug. And a bug is just a missed expectation. Somebody expected this, they got this other thing. So I look at that big picture between operations and business. And one of the projects that I was on, it was a bunch of teams that need to come together on a roadmap to deliver something very, very big. And it was working really, really well. We had 1 month left to go. And things are really green, not like artificially green, like sentimentally green. The teams are feeling good. The risks are low. I'm managing the risk. Everything has a mitigation. And we're like around this beautiful glide path to release with 30 days left. And it occurred to me talking to someone in operations, again, a different lens, a different set of requirements about, because there's something on the roadmap, like for rollout and release, we have a strategy. And the operations guy said, wait, you're removing final value fees for C2C customers in Germany, right? That's a big deal. What if you succeed? I'm like, well, that'd be great. And he goes, no, really succeed. Like it's viral. So what kind of capacity do you need for that? And what an interesting thing to be asked. Because we're used to failure, right? What about the success case and that requirement? That if it blows up over there in every good way, operations, we have a duty to tell operations, we may get crushed with great traffic coming because the fees are now removed. So it's something to think about. It's like you're not used to that, but it's a requirement like, oh, what if we succeed? It's just an example of something you don't often think of.
All right, so I'm actually really happy I got to go last because, when you asked me this question, I was like thinking back to my, career and like some places I've been to, I never had to worry about that. We had someone that was just so solid. This is the way, and everyone just said, this is the way, and we all go. And then I've been in places where it's super dysfunctional, like how are we making money, right? And that's kind of good because that's why I was brought there to fix it. And I think the thing to realize is everyone here works at a different company. Some of us are doing hardware, some of us are SaaS companies, some of us consulting. But even the size of your company, if you're a Series A, your seed, all the way to D to public, these things all change. And even if you're at the same company, things will change. There's 15 of you in that company. right? The way you guys are doing things and doing requirements is going to look very, very differently than overnight success and you become 100, 200, 500, 800. So how do I answer this question? Well, what is the one thing that doesn't change? Even if you're 15 people making 50,000 to 5,000 people making 55 million, is your customers, right? At the time that you're at your company, who are your customers? And once you understand what your customers need, is how you build the requirements, right? Because if you're a 15-person team, your customers maybe couldn't care less if it's a little bit flaky, it doesn't work well. If it delivers that value that only your company can send. But you get up to like $55 million, your customers are like, you know, the Oregon state, and if it doesn't work, your tax return doesn't come back. Suddenly it's a very, very different proposition than getting things fast now. So I would answer to you, it's always one, what is your customers? And this is something we should all be asking ourselves. This is quality. What is our customers? How do they get the value? How are we providing the value? And then looking back at the system, is it doing what we expect it to do? And if not, why and how do we fix it? What is our role in going into it and fixing it? Is it a technical solution? Is it a process solution, right? Is it, you know, I need to stand at the door and say, you can't pass until I see this? Or is it, do I need to work with my leadership team to build out something? And depending on, you know, what that is, it could change based off the company. And you really kind of have to be able to draw back to the basics, which is this serving my customer at this point? Is this what will bring value to them? Therefore, we will be getting value back as a business. And I have to apologize, I have to go.
Jeff, it's very kindly stay for part of this panel discussion, even though he has to go to the airport, go back to the Bay Area. So.
Let me piggyback on something because I can't resist. So, hi Jeff, thank you. You could get all the requirements wrong and your customers will still love you if you take care of them with customer support. And, or you see this with GPT, right? It's like, oh, this sucks, but you saw Llewellyn, it's getting better. I don't have to do that anymore. Or a beta or an alpha. You could totally get it wrong, but they go, you respond to your community forums, for example, with personality and hey, we're sorry, or we know about this, or thank you for telling me. They'll forgive you. They'll hang in there with you. So don't worry about getting requirements wrong. But I agree. I mean, you got to listen to your customers and it's good feedback for your testing to know, are we on the right track?
We have a hand up there.
Yes, there are, he's saying, yes, yeah, sure, John, but there's going to be costs associated with that approach. Customer service costs, maintenance costs. Absolutely, yes. And yeah, so here we are ready to talk about the enterprise. But if you're working for a startup in the audience, take hope because your agility with a lowercase a and your ability to take care of your customers. Imagine there's only 2 of you in the company. You don't have a customer support team. You are the customer support team. Or maybe it's just something that maybe Llewellyn will share his code with us. And he's not in business to do that. But if he's collegial as, well, if he is as collegial as he was on the floor there, I was pretty impressed. It's a guy I want to work with. So I'd forgive him if his code wasn't exactly meeting my requirements for the first time. So you can compete with the enterprise. And that's to leverage it back. That's why I want to continue finding work in enterprise so I can keep them humble and say, you know, there are startups that will do eBay better than eBay does if we're not taking care of customers.
Thank you. I'm going to take these comments and expand it a little bit. I am the co-chair of the management track, so I am interested in asking our panelists kind of a management question. You know, in managing requirements, often you're dealing with the need to change. I'm sure this would not be foreign to anyone involved in project management, program management. Often you have to balance between what would be beneficial, necessary change with the change control from a classical project management sense of controlling scope creep. So So in making sure the requirements are right, especially in an organizational change context, or you bring a new product to a marketplace to potentially change an entire industry, how do you balance in capturing the correct requirements, got a necessary beneficial change versus this change control that you have to impose to some extent to control scope creep, budgetary constraints, things like that?
Yeah, so that's, that's definitely pretty challenging. We are trying to do a better job of kind of moving more into, I guess, an enterprise grade of how we operate. And so if there are changes, for example, if we get into testing, we find a bug or we find a requirements or something that we missed, we will basically perform an assessment of that, I guess, at that point in time, and figure out if it's, if it's a bug, then I guess that's one thing. But if it's a feature that hasn't been built or we didn't account for it in the original requirements, we typically will, put that on hold or put it in a new feature, so that we continue on with the feature that we've being developed and really kind of make sure that feature gets out the door. That doesn't mean that, we don't have slip ups. We've had some slip ups here recently where, they've said, yeah, this is really critical and we don't necessarily have time to go build out all our process and really follow it. So there has been some edge cases here and there that we have decided to make the change right then and build it, and test it as a part of that feature. But it's definitely not ideal. It's a balancing act, right? Because you got customers that are demanding things are late, like they've been late. And there's a fine line there between trying to really do the right thing, get it out the door versus really trying to follow a process, and make sure that works. So honestly, it just kind of depends, given the situation.
Thank you. I agree with that, actually. And diving into the enterprise world where you have multiple teams doing multiple different things, there's really I recommend 2 lists for every team. There's the internal autonomous list of the things that I need to be doing that I have the freedom to do without impacting anybody else. And if your systems are designed well, then you have more autonomy in each team. If your systems are not designed well, then there's a lot of dependencies between teams, which leads me to my second list. We try to reduce in domain-driven design the idea of integration between systems, reduce that to a low hum. That second list you want to take care of pretty quickly because you're holding other people up whenever there's a dependency. And if you've ever been a part of the building software, testing software that needs to go out yesterday or the day before or the year before, and it can't because we haven't met all the dependencies, then economically you're actually hurting the company because you're not innovating fast enough. So you want to initially design the system so that every team can be autonomous, and then the budget doesn't have to be so high to get a lot done. That's kind of the smart move. If you're not there, then you want to take action to get there, and you start prioritizing refactorings to make your software more supple, more nimble, more agile. Make the software agile to meet the team structure of agile.
I like that. Your internal list and the things that you have autonomy for versus the integration. That my first thought was, where are we seeing scope creep? Where is everybody in this room seeing scope creep right now today? In job descriptions. If you're looking for work, look at what they're asking for. You know why? Because they can. It's an employer's market. It costs them nothing. In fact, it costs them less than nothing. They're going to get more value by asking us to do all these things because they know so many people are out of work. So my short answer, I know, I'm sorry, I'll try to keep it short, is cost. That's how to keep scope creep down. When it switches to an employee's market, watch what happens. It's going to cost more for them to ask for all that stuff, right? So as on a project, I look for that. I look for there's a term we've all heard called good enough. And good enough actually doesn't mean mediocre. Good means quality and enough means stop. This is more than what I need. Like this isn't the Ritz-Carlton, but it doesn't need to be. We just need a space to confer. Food's got to be good. We have to have lighting. We have to have AV, and it has to be reasonably okay, right? And so that good enough is about economics. And one of the criteria of good enough is the search for alternatives more costly right now than helpful? And if the answer is yes, then you stop. And I think it just comes down to any project I've been on, everybody seems to be aware of, we could do anything you want to do. It's just how much do you want to pay for this, either in money or in time or in labor. And we need to like drill into that every project to see what the trade-offs might be.
Thank you for that. In determining whether the requirements are correct, of course, often we need to assure that we have the correct subject matter experts and domain knowledge. This time I'm gonna start with John, because domain-driven design. You know, how do we make sure we got the correct subject matter experts and domain expertise? Often organizations, subject matter experts are so valuable, they can't even devote a fraction of their time to important projects.
Okay, so this is a very common question. Everywhere I go, who's the domain expert? Everybody asks me, because they've finally figured out what a domain is. Now they want to know who's the expert of said domain. The expert of the domain is the person who's expert at what the domain does. So if you're in a legal domain, then your expert is likely a lawyer. If you're in an oil and gas domain, then you're probably going with the engineer who knows how to extract and transport oil and gas. If you're in a manufacturing plant that makes dog food, then the person who actually formulates the dog food, or the person who does the PLC equipment to manage all of the manufacturing equipment, those are domain experts. Those are the people who actually understand how the business works. Generally, it happens that product owners don't normally come out of that space for exactly what was said. We value those domain experts' time doing the work that they traditionally do, but we do need to think about upgrading their job description, because most companies now are both a traditional company and a software company. And the software is no longer just something you're doing on the side. It's something that is being used to provide the service that the experts already know. So the domain experts now have to be a mine of information, and they have to make themselves available to the product owners and the business analysts and the developers and the testers, so that when we're doing our work, we're doing it in alignment with the domain. They're the ones that know. Now, they do forget, and they do create problems, domain experts. I love you, domain experts, if you're a domain expert. But we do have this issue where we create pain for our development teams, because we create more words for one definition than we need of a topic. So we might have 3 or 4 words that mean the same thing, and we may have 3 or 4 different definitions of a single word. Our terminology gets lost, and the domain experts don't keep track of that stuff. So designers have to hold their feet to the fire and say, but wait, in this context, you said invoice meant this, but now you're using this other definition for invoice in that same context. So part of the requirement that we have in domain-driven design is that domain experts are made available to the team, and they are accountable to the team to stay in lockstep with their contextual definitions and terminologies, because we use those in the code in domain-driven design. When the business changes, and it says, hey, we now want to do this different in this context. We know where the context is in the code, and we know exactly where those words are in the code. We can get at the code and change the code in lockstep with the business. So that creates a speed of development. But the domain expert, if they're viewed traditionally as, hey, you're the business and you're not part of IT, that's the first wall that has to come down. The very first wall.
You know, I guess for us, like in energy storage, you know, it's a relatively new world. So, you know, and I'm gonna take it more from, I guess, a testing perspective. So, you know, in a smaller startup, for example, we had less people, but they had more knowledge about the product as a whole. We applied, you know, some agile methodologies and principles. So we started splitting these people up into multiple teams. So now we've got a lot more teams than we used to have. The knowledge about the product as a whole is, you know, one individual or a series of individuals is kind of split now across multiple individuals. You know, but that's a real world problem that we are trying to solve. So certainly I have a tester who is our HVAC resident expert. He's our domain knowledge expert. He provides direction to development who is not as familiar with how things are supposed to work. You know, that's a real asset, you know, and it brings real value to the organization. And then I've got, you know, another one is kind of a front end CCUI expert, or it's really our front end application, but it also involves power movement of a certain product we have. And so, you know, what I try to do is basically have the expertise in those areas, but I'm also trying to cross-train others to have similar knowledge and similar domain expertise. And I think, you know, QA has a golden opportunity to become the domain experts of the products, because development is typically focused on smaller pieces of things. They get data in, data out. They don't really care how the other part of the product is supposed to work. And, you know, QA is often the one doing the stakeholder demos or the product owner demos, because the developers honestly don't have a clue. So I think that's, you know, that's value to an organization. And others, you know, it's something that we need to make sure that we are empowering our teams to do, and also making sure that we're educating them and they're taking the time to educate themselves. It's not something we can just spoon feed, like you've got to go out and get it. But I think it's really important for QA people in general to have that domain knowledge, domain expertise. It is critical for sure.
Well, Ron, you're my battery go-to now. I know nothing other than lithium. You can't put it on an airplane, right? You can't store it. And John, you made a good point about walls, and which made me think about not only domain expertise, but silos, which we all hear at conferences, silos are bad. No, they're not bad. They give us specialization. They give us identity. They give us purpose. There's legal, there's business, there's operations, there's security, there's localization. Hi, Sue. I learned a new word from Sue, right to left language. I'd forgotten about the RTL. Like, okay, so she gave me some domain specific language today in her talk. Sue will be my go-to for loc, right? And then there's not only L10N localization, but I18N and internationalization. There's accessibility. Hi, Michael Larson. He's my accessibility go-to. So we all are here at a conference to confer and share domain expertise with each other, namely AI. Thank you, Llewellyn, and thank you, whoever spoke on AI. It's good to have that. Now, that being said, if all we do is stay in our silos, okay, now we're adding some risk, because that ignorance may come back to bite us. So what's the right balance, guys, of how much you should know, even as a quality engineer, And I will suggest that like a program manager like me needs to know all the silos and what they are, so I can be useful and say, has anyone talked to legal yet? Because the Ts and Cs, they need to be updated, right? And no one wants to do that. Okay, I'll do it. You know, I'm the perfect person because I'm not in any one silo. I'm in kind of all the silos. So I think what I want to suggest about silos is it's just like in the old days when you had cubicles. The wall doesn't have to be so high. Maybe they can just be lower. So there is separation, but we can communicate to each other about what's important. You also may have heard at your companies, your CEO might have said, come on, everybody, pick up a shovel and help and do something that's not in your job description. Well, wait, if I picked up a shovel around my house, and my wife will have something to say about it. And so will the power company and the sewer lines. And you can dial 811 and they'll spray paint your lawn where the lines are. Okay, so don't pick up a shovel yet until you know a little bit about the domain. And so a silo doesn't have to be so opaque, but they're not bad in and of themselves.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes left, and in that time, I'm gonna ask our panelists to comment on the requirements that are more non-functional than functional. I mean, as we all know these days, a lot of applications are deployed in the cloud that present security challenges, design-related challenges. So let me start with John. I know you just spoke with
Okay, yeah. I'll also honestly try to give a short answer. Okay. Scalability. Let's pick that one. To what degree can your application meet the needs of tens of thousands of people when it needs to? And so, like the story about operations and the DevOps guy saying, we could make you a scalable set of clusters and that kind of thing. So that's the thing I worry most about, because it was such a fun lesson. Like, what about the success case? So for me, what pops right into my head is, are we capable of meeting all kinds of requirements because we've thought about scalability?
The theme of mine today is adaptability. So if the software is not adaptable to change, then you're probably wasting a lot of money. The issue with adaptability comes from a lack of ability to separate context. And this is an art and a science both. But as QA folks, you can actually ask the question, why am I testing billing and accounts payable in the same module? This isn't the same. I mean, it seems like it's in finance, so I understand why you might have done it, but it doesn't seem like the same context. And the more you get an eye for context from a domain-driven design perspective, the more you can actually see when you're testing things that don't belong together. You can raise that up and say, this isn't necessarily a bug, but this may be a non-functional adaptability issue, because when we go to need to change things in the future for one of these three things that have been coupled together, it may be kind of difficult in the future. And you can at least add that as an addendum. Hey, this may not be adaptable for the future. You might want to consider separating these concerns.
Yeah, so I guess for us, it's probably scalability as well. So if you go out and look up Australia super battery, you'll see probably a story about Powin. So we roughly spent the last year and a half trying to build up our largest customer. We just successfully did some deployments recently. But in order to make that happen, we had to make some pretty big architectural changes to be able to scale to that size and that magnitude. And so it did. It required a redesign. It required a lot of effort, a lot of work to get that thing to where it can operate efficiently. We're still working out some of the bugs, some of the kinks, but also, from a testing perspective, we had to do some different things. So we had to create some simulators, obviously, because we just don't have equipment out readily available to test, so we have to simulate those conditions. And so we also have kind of scaled that from our testing perspective. We've put a lot of the things within Docker. So we've Dockerized these containers. And now we're trying to mimic those customers and those stations. So, you know, it's a process, it's a journey. And I think each challenge is kind of different. Each challenge is unique. But sometimes you have to put the pause on something that previously worked. You were able to generate or get a certain amount of business. But now you've got to move in a different direction. So it may mean scrapping what was before and not being afraid to start new. And you know, that's that takes a lot of courage, right? You know, you don't want to, you're scrapping something that you know works, and you're having to shift and try something new that you've never done before. And so, but I think, you know, we had to be willing to do that and had to be willing to take the risk of failure in certain situations and be able to move forward.
Well, I appreciate all the comments made by our panelists. Obviously, this is only a 1 hour panel discussion. We cannot possibly cover all aspects of importance to enterprise software. I noted down here a few things that I would like to follow up in a future meetup or events like that. Things that have come up, but we didn't specifically have much time to talk about is like the role of design, the role of business and technology architecture, especially as it relates to new platforms, possibly in the cloud. And then the role of domain-specific business analysis and use of ontology that may be specific to a domain or an enterprise. Last but not least, from an IT services management perspective, we didn't talk anything about operations. So that's a topic unto itself. We welcome, appreciate everybody's attention and for coming to today's panel discussion. Sorry, there's no time for questions.